what are you going to do to protect that? You're young, you think nothing's going to happen. I had several friends who passed away from COVID before they were 35. You just never know. And what I've learned is you've got to have a plan in place.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Lindsay. I am getting ready to kick off the weekend. Your dad is home. Your sister is ready to go for a walk on the beach with the dog. The life is good, man. That's all I got to say. How about you?
I'm doing good. Kicking off the weekend, same as you. I'm going to hopefully do some R&R this weekend. Looking forward to not staring at my computer for any measurable amount of time. That is a weird concept to think about.
Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Well, I got to tell you, we have a treat today. We have Mr. Chris Greene with us, the flood guru himself, and it is a pretty special day. I don't know how we got the honor, but he's spending part of his birthday with us. So welcome to the show and happy birthday, Mr. Greene.
Woohoo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you didn't get to go golfing. I don't know exactly how I worked into that plan, but I'm hoping that I was not between you and golf on your birthday.
No. To be fair, I haven't played golf in 2 years because we've been so busy on the flood side.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, tell us a little bit about how you started in the industry.
I got into the industry back in 2009. I strictly got into it to be on the national catastrophe side. My master's degree is actually in flood mitigation, and I was about 2 hours short of a minor in hostage and biosecurity negotiation. And so I got into it in 2009. My whole thing was to go work on the national catastrophe side. Well, I grew up with a severe learning disability. Wasn't even supposed to go to college. Ended up graduating top of my class for my master's. Well, when I got into the sales side, I created a partners in education program. And I enjoyed that so much that I ended up staying with Liberty Mutual in it for about 7 years with Liberty. And I ended up working with about 1,200 schools across the country. So I really enjoyed it so much. I just kind of stayed in it. And then I went to work for MetLife for about 1.5 years. And then I started a traditional independent agency back in 2015. Stayed in the traditional independent agency for about 3 years. I kept getting asked questions about flood. People would find out what my background was in. And I had to kind of make a decision. So I came up with a website kind of as a joke. I just wanted to start conversations. floodinsuranceguru.com. And before I knew it, we had to make a decision. But what people, I guess, pulled people in as well is I bought a house in a high-risk flood zone about 12 years ago. Had a terrible experience with it. And so for the last 14 years, I've been trying to help people avoid the same disasters that I went through.
Hey guys, if you're looking to improve your bottom line, allow your team to operate efficiently, and really improve that customer retention, I believe you should check out Ascend. Ascend is the all-in-one insurance payment solution. They are focused on streamlining your invoicing, premium financing, accounting, and they'll even make your carrier payables for you. They are taking agency bill and making it as easy as direct bill. That is a game changer. They integrate with all of the major AMS players, and here's the best part. It's free. There is no subscription, no cost to you. They allow your customers to pay how they want. If you are interested in improving your efficiency, go visit ascend.com/insurance refocused and let them know that we sent you.
Yeah, most people, when you think of insurance, they want to avoid the big disasters, right? But it sounds like you kind of run straight through it. Will you, do you feel comfortable talking about what happened that brought you to wanting to, the situation with the flood that happened?
Yeah, so I went to buy a house in a flood zone, and the real estate agent, the mortgage company, even the insurance company I worked for at the time had no idea what to do. Told me my premiums are going to be $3,000 a year. Find out 10 days before closing, like most people do. The loan officer's like, hey, it's not going to work. The numbers are just too high. And I say, look, the premium shouldn't be too high on this. Here's what the risk profile is. Here's what the year built. The house is built within compliance. It's being grandfathered. So I took a $3,000 rate and I turned it into a $300 rate. And it was at that time that I saw a major gap in education in the insurance industry, the real estate industry, and the mortgage industry when it came to flood insurance. And so years down the road, that's also what kind of motivated me to start a company called the Flood Professor, where I teach CE across the country now to real estate, insurance agent, and mortgage companies.
What's funny, Chris, is I think that's how we met. I think I met you at a class that you were teaching. And if I'm not mistaken, that might be 10 years ago at this point. Like I was still at the association and you were one of the instructors. Maybe not. I don't know, but it seems like
Probably not that long ago because I didn't go into flood only until 18.
Okay. Yeah. So
And I didn't start teaching until 2020.
Oh, okay. Then maybe it's not, but I will tell you, I've known about the flood guru for a very long time. And I think you're right. I don't know if you know this, but about 3 years ago, we bought a house in South Carolina. So we moved from Columbus, Ohio to South Carolina, and I'm about 4 minutes from the coast. I have a lagoon in front of my house and behind my house. And I learned very quickly what flood insurance was and what your insurance does in a coastal state versus one that's pretty insurance. I don't know. Not very low risk, let's say, in Columbus, Ohio. And, I actually had a lot to learn in that process. I don't regret doing that, but I will tell you as a buyer, you don't realize what that looks like. And you need education to know what that means, right?
It is, well, actually, what's funny is we do more business in areas like Columbus, Ohio than we do on the
Are
coast.
you kidding me?
No, because if there's no education there. So on the coast, you've got some education, resources. Well, when these people either lose everything or they get a letter from their bank, they absolutely have no idea what to do. And so it's one of the reasons why we've always focused inland. It's like, look, like Houston, for example, New Orleans, you've got awareness, you've got education, but areas like Nashville, Tennessee, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you don't have it. So people really have no idea what to do, especially after a flood loss. Hey, how do I get disaster assistance? How do I get approved for a disaster loan? And those are all things we walk people through that have really nothing to do with insurance. Is, hey, here's how to get disaster assistance, maybe on top of the insurance you already had, or maybe you didn't have insurance. Here's the financial recovery roadmap. And, here's where you're going to be today. Here's where you're going to be next year. This is going to be the difference between financial and emotional recovery and not having it. And recently, I actually just did a blog on this when my family visited Dominican Republic. And one of the comparisons I was making was actually the importance of the insurance system in the United States compared to other countries when it comes to financial and emotional recovery.
Interesting. Well, before we dive into a completely different topic, I did want to highlight one of the things you said. You said, I'm a person that had a learning disability and I never should have had a college degree. And you don't know me very well, but I actually have two daughters. One you're meeting today, and her name is Morgan. She's actually older than Lindsay, and she's on the autism spectrum. And I got to tell you, I love hearing people that have overcome and be able to create a career when they have some challenges or have something that they learned differently. And, I just saw Ryan Hanley posted something about having ADHD and really learning what that means. I saw David Carruthers did an incredible post and podcast about overcoming that. So I love that we're actually mainstream talking about this topic. That's not the way it's been. Certainly not for my daughter. That's not the way that's been. So I commend you for number one, overcoming, and number two, finding a way to embrace your abilities rather than the disability, because that's a tough thing,
It is. And I actually think people like that actually have an advantage over others because what I tell someone is if you find someone with a learning disability, usually autism, ADHD, you can find that one thing they can focus on, they will go faster and further than most people because they're so super focused.
Yep. I agree. And it's a superpower. Honestly, the social thing isn't their thing. It's actually being hyper focused on the thing that makes them unique. So when I think about the people that are talking about this and that are very successful, you can see that they're super focused on certain things and they don't fit the norm at all. But that's the beauty of it, that there is really no norm, if we're being honest, right? There really isn't. But anyway, so as you know, I actually help agents in a different way. You help them understand the flood risk and really understanding that whole side of it. I help agents understand their own business risk. And in part of that is helping them plan for the future of their agency and perpetuation planning. Part of that is anticipating what might prevent their agency from continuing to operate, whether there's a death in the agency, whether there's a disability in the agency, where there's a change in ownership or a change in a key person. You've had some experience in that area, and I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, so really, I was a one-man shop outside of virtual assistants who had one other team member who recently left. And actually, all this really happened right before they left. Is I was on the road, kind of like you are, Carey, speaking all these different events. Just so happened to be home for about a 60-day period, and I'm on a low-carb diet. And I was so extreme low carb that I actually had a reaction to it that ended up turning into congestive heart failure. And so it stopped the blood flow to my heart. My legs swelled up, my feet swelled up. I didn't have feeling in them probably for a couple of weeks. Lost my vision, and I'm diabetes. I'm diabetic, and it ended up taking my diabetes and it fast forwarded it 25 years. So what it did is it caused bleeding blood vessels in my eyes. So about 3 months after the doctors had released me, I started to lose my vision in my left eye. And by the time they figured out, I was pretty much legally blind in my left eye, where I pretty much can't see anything on my left eye, and my right eye was headed that way as well. And so that's kind of what brings me really to today is that, when the problem is a lot of the flood stuff I do, it's not like just getting a quote. I mean, it's literally analyzing a property, looking at a 3 to 5 year forecast. And so what happens is, I got to find a way that how do we pass along at least 95%, closer hopefully to 100% of that knowledge to someone else, where if something like this happens, we can protect the incomes of our team members. How do we keep that going? And so that's basically what I've been doing for the last 4 months is trying to figure out a way to transition this knowledge, not necessarily the selling the company. That's not really my ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is, to constantly stay involved with it, even if I'm semi-retired. But how do we keep this going? How do we develop these teams so if something does happen to me, it doesn't interrupt our referral relationships? We can keep going the way we need to. Because right now I'm out about once a month where I have to get eye injections and laser treatment. And then more than likely we'll have eye surgery in the fall, which could take my vision away in both eyes for about 45 days.
If you're like me and many other small businesses across the country where hiring, training, and retaining employees is a challenge, Agency VA has a solution for you. Agency VA has over 1,000 VAs hired, managed, and trained in the Philippines, Latin America, and India. But did you also know they have 100 licensed agents here in the U.S. that can help you manage your book? I use a VA who lives in the Philippines, and I absolutely love her. The process was simple. We had a consultation where they asked me my needs, goals, and concerns, and matched me with Allie, who has been an absolute game changer for me. Employing Allie through Agency VA has allowed me to focus on my business without worrying about HR concerns, turnover, and monitoring payroll. The best part is the Agency VA team was eager to help my company and also make sure that Allie is getting employee benefits, a competitive salary to help her live a better life in the Philippines. If this is something that you are struggling with inside your agency, please visit agencyva.com/insurance refocused and set up a time to talk to them about your hiring needs. So for people that don't know you, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at you and I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? You look like the picture of health. Like this doesn't happen we all think this doesn't happen. You know what I'm saying? And I had a similar health issue. I was 48 years old and suffered a heart attack, was having many TIAs, and it's terrifying. It's life-changing. And so, sadly, Chris, I get these calls. I get calls from agents that either someone has a massive health issue and is no longer able to be inside the agency, or sadly, some people, they're single owners and they pass away with no plan. I guess from this experience, tell me what the process has been for the past 4 months to figure out a way to to preserve that knowledge and to continue your work in the best way that you can, given the situation that your site is, is not what it used to be. Tell me what that process looks like for you.
Well, a lot of it has been, I guess, really accepting, hey, I'm not going to be able to do a lot. I may not be able to do any of this 20 years down the road. But how do we continue to provide that knowledge just to not just our team, but property owners, insurance agents? How do we transition it? So I've actually been working with one of our virtual assistants, and we're literally going through my brain every single day for several hours, and we're documenting not just every process, every possible situation we can think of. So that if I'm out, if something happens, then all our team has to do is go to a guide that we have built inside of our CRM. And it's a step-by-step guide. Hey, here's what to do in this situation. This is what this looks like.
Well, and that's so helpful for not even perpetuation, but bringing on new employees. I guess perpetuation would be like transferring ownership, but all of these different situations.
Which you see, and that's also a requirement we have with a team member. After 90 days, we start looking at someone kind of coming underneath them, and it's their job to train them. But then the condition of training them is they've also got to document it in the CRM through video, through documentation. And now basically, as this person's getting promoted through the organization, the person underneath them is developing underneath them. So if they leave, if they get sick, the next person down knows exactly how to do it. And so you're creating consistency.
You're creating consistency, and it's by documenting it. If you go on a week-long vacation, or hell, if you go travel Europe for a month, the rest of your team is not going to be scrambling the entire month that you're gone and bothering you while you're on vacation. Or, hello, I'm a woman. If I have a baby and I decide that I'm going to stay home with my baby, I can actually enjoy my rest and not have to feel like, oh crap, I'm the only one who knows all these things or knows how to do all of these things, and they're not going to be able to do it. Write it down, document it. If that's the only thing that people learn from this episode, you got to write down what you do, because it's important. No one else knows or does things as well as you. So if you tell them how to do it, they're more likely to do it the right way.
Or they like to do things different, like email. Like I tell our team, hey, I'm sending this email. I said, look, I don't want you to send an email like I would send an email. Yes, we have to take a certain approach, but that's the whole reason why we hired you, is because your personality. So I want people to see your personality in email. We need to follow a certain template about how we treat people and things like that. But no, we don't want to turn you into a robot. That's why people work with us. And so it's finding those different things. But I'm sure you're familiar with snippets or email templates. It's also one of the things that I build and our team builds as well. Hey, if I send the email more than twice a day, I'm writing a snippet for it. And the snippets are always available for no matter who the team member is. Maybe we have a VA that's starting. Then they can go in snippets and type in the words, and it comes up, and the email's already written for them to respond. So whether someone's been with us 2 days or 2 years or 20 years, the customer is having a universal response, but so is the employee, because they don't feel those frustrations or those struggles of not being able to find information.
I think that's not as common. Would you explain what that is, just for the listeners, if anyone's not?
Oh, you mean the email templates and the snippets?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So basically what it is, it's a pre-built email. It's all it really is. Mm-hmm. Now in our system, it identifies with the contact. So we'll usually use their first name, and then the email's already written. So even if it's the same person sending it 10 times a day, they're literally hitting one button instead of writing out the whole email every time. And so what that's doing is that's saving them time, but it's also makes them feel like more of a sense of accomplishment, because I'm not writing the same email 100 times a day. It's not bringing that morale down. I can go and do things I really enjoy inside the organization.
Now, Chris, were you already doing that before this happened, or are these changes you made? Okay.
We've been doing snippets and email templates, since we started on HubSpot almost 5 years ago.
Yeah. So is there anything, once this occurred, in retrospect, that, you wish you had done prior? And I'm sure the answer is yes, but let's hear those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of those things at the time, we had an office manager. They were kind of doing their part. I was doing mine. But I feel like I didn't take the time maybe to develop them to a higher point, or if something like this happened, they didn't feel the additional stress of not being able to find certain information, know how to do certain parts of the job.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. When you're working and your head's down and you're working in your business, it's hard to pick your head up and think about the practicality of what will occur if you're not able to be there for an extended period of time. And unfortunately, for some Listen, the reality is something like 53% of independent agents are pretty small. They're very, very small shops. They might be 1, 2, 3 employees. So the fact that they're wearing a million hats is reality. And the fact that there's one person that has a huge amount of knowledge that they might not feel they have the time to document or the time to do these things. But sadly, it's your agency and it's your legacy, and it's actually might be one of your largest assets. It's really important to protect it. And so if anyone listening to this, I think number one, you said you had HubSpot. That's unusual. Number one. Number two,
I don't have an AMS. I built my own AMS.
yeah. So, but you have data and you've got processes and you've got procedures, because that's what HubSpot is. It's like a marketing machine and a CRM that does all kinds of things for you. If you don't have those things and you're not capturing it, it's literally in your head and your business is not transferable. And it's one thing to want to hold everything tight, but when you do that, it actually hurts the people around you. It hurts your team, it hurts your family, it hurts your clients, right? It just truly does.
And I will tell you also what the situation also forced me to do is something I talked about for years is, hey, do the 10% I really enjoy and the 10% I'm really good at, and let everyone else handle everything. And I'd gotten to a certain point, but like most owners, I was probably struggling to let go with the control and all that. A lot of them don't want to let go of that. Now I spend most of my days either with the content ideas, creating the content, making sure our systems are where they need to be. And then that 1% on flood risk that I need to be spending my time on to really maybe help those higher up commercial clients really understand. But as I'm going through and I'm meeting with them and things like that, and I'm recording those calls, and then once a week sitting down with our team and explaining why we made this decision during this call. If I'm out, you have the capability to be able to do this.
Yeah. What's the thing that you held on the tightest to that you wish you would have let it go a long time ago?
Honestly, I would probably say some of the smaller commercial stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just wasting my time. And I'll give you an example. Recently, we wrote one policy that is equal to 80% of a 4-year-old book of business with another carrier within a week.
Crazy.
And being able to spend my time on that kind of stuff, so it helps our team. It puts more money in their hands, and they can focus on the things that they're good at.
So do you feel, how did your team and your family respond to this, Chris? I mean, it had to be a super difficult thing to go through. And, talk to us about that, because here's the deal. It's an emotional thing. My family, trust me, when I had a heart attack, my family, it was a wake up call, not just for me. It was a wake up call for a lot of people in my family. Is not something that people expected. And it makes you just change some things. It makes you think differently. So how did your family respond when this happened, and maybe even your team?
Well, I'll start with my family. It was kind of hard for them because my mom died from diabetes when she was 66. My mother-in-law died from COVID when she was 66.
Oh, boy.
It's one of the reasons why I've always told my wife that I was probably 90% retire when I'm 50, is because I want to be able to enjoy those things based on that track record. So from a family standpoint, it was, taking that and, fast forwarding 25 years, because I have a 7-year-old. And so, it was big things like that. What's funny now is if my daughter's using my phone, she goes straight to all my app with all my data in it. And she can tell me like what my blood sugar's at instantly, all this stuff.
Oh, man.
Now, from my team standpoint, at the time, I really just had an office manager. She was an absolutely awesome team member, and she stepped in and just kind of handled everything.
Yeah.
The way our team's been now, where I've had to be out with injections, every one of our team members now has been with us 7 weeks or less.
Oh, wow.
And they've all just kind of stepped in and done it.
Wow. Chris, that's a gift. It truly is a gift that you've got that kind of team around you. No question about it. So what advice?
And I'll tell you where I went and got, honestly, where I got that team. This is going to sound terrible, and most agency owners aren't going to say this, but I will, as I feel that, unfortunately, with the way we use technology and things like that, people are starting to overlook older people in the industry. And while other people are overlooking them, we're actually going after them. Maybe not necessarily someone, hey, I'm ready to be promoted to CEO. Look, I'm 15 years from retirement. I'm not looking for promotion. Yes, I'd like to make more money, but I'm looking for more stability and really being able to help people. And when our office manager left, that's exactly what we went and got an office manager. So someone had, they may not be the best with the technology. I could teach them that, but they had 25 years of experience, which I couldn't replace, which could really help with the team that was coming on. That was, had known nothing about flood.
Right. Right.
Well, and
And
that
so
tracks right.
we hired two
Yeah.
people from the same office.
And that tracks right with what you told us earlier about, look, I know that flood insurance isn't the pretty shiny, like what everybody wants to work in insurance, but I had a bad experience and I wanted to protect other people from that. And hey, I don't care if it's, people coming in, the shiny employees who know all the tech and are ready to, take over my agency someday, but I want the employees who actually care and who actually just want to help me protect people. So I think that just goes to show that your agency's brand is probably pretty strong and you guys have like some really good culture in your agency.
It's actually why we removed commissions completely a couple years ago.
Really?
So nobody on our team gets paid commission at all. Instead, everyone gets a base salary and then they get a portion of revenue that comes in every month. So if I get paid $5,000 to go and speak somewhere, each one of my team members get a portion of that. If we help set someone up with a policy, maybe it's got agency fees, they get a portion of that. If I take on a big mitigation project, they get a portion of that. So they're getting a portion of every single dollar that comes in our organizations or our other organizations. So then what they're looking at of, hey, how for healthy growth is, they can look at a certain situation. No, that's not going to be the best fit for us. There's a better fit down the street. So they're looking to protect financially us long term because they know that they've got some skin in the game.
Right. Right. So,
but it's also why I require our team to each take a week of paid vacation every quarter.
Every quarter? Nice.
Every quarter, you've got to take at least 1 week because everybody's remote. And so I have a 5-step mental health plan with working from home. The first thing is you got to have an office with a designated door, and that's got nothing to do with getting your work done. What it's got to do with is when you walk out that door and you close that door, and your family's on the other side of that door, you're not associating it with work. The other thing is you got to leave your computer for an hour at lunch. I don't care if you're going to walk the dog, if you go hang on a square, whatever, you got to get away from it. The third thing is you only work 9 to 5. The way we're set up with people in different time zones is the other time zones will pick up that workload. When you come in the next day, your desk is not full. The fourth thing is you have to be on video with our team members and our customers every day. Because you're remote, we don't want you getting into kind of depression because it will happen when you look down, you look up in 4 months, and you're not interacting with your friends and your family the way you were. This allows us to see people all day, every day. And then the last part is taking that week of vacation every quarter.
Man, that just sounds like an awesome culture. Are you hiring? Just kidding.
Well, I'm always hiring, and I'll tell you this too. When we bring on someone, though, 2 weeks after we bring them on, we also bring on a VA to basically go with them. So if they're out, the VAs take care of 90% of their work. When they come back in, they don't feel stressed out of, hey, it's harder for me to leave work than it is to go in there because, I come back with the stress. No, the VA's taking care of anything that's not licensed. So each one of our team members is only having what I call emotional conversations with referral partners, prospects, and building that book and building that relationship. And the VA can help with other stuff. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, a referral partner says, hey, I get a copy of these 16 policies. Probably in most agencies, your office manager, whoever is going to spend 4.5 hours getting all that information together, VA had it over in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also like your rule about having your camera on. I know that that's like people debate that all the time, but I'll tell you what, I work remote. I just graduated full-time from grad school and I also do this podcast. And in all of those areas are all remote. And well, my classes were sometimes in person, but I always had my camera on. No one wants to stare at a little circle initial or a picture on their screen. They want to talk to the real person. And I found when I had my camera on and the other person didn't, you don't get as much of those, like I always refer to it as like the doorway talk, like when you're passing by someone's office and you stand in their doorway, like that doesn't happen when you have your camera off. You have to be able to see people, oh, is that your dog in the background? Oh, I really like that picture that's hanging behind you. You don't get as much of that like behind the scenes employee culture when you're remote, and you have to make up for that somehow.
Now, I will tell you this, and I just learned this about a month and a half ago. I had two new team members. They came from the same office. They actually worked together for 5 years. But the newer one, what I discovered was they weren't doing as well. They weren't growing as quickly because by being on the screen share all the time with the other team member they used to work with, is they were afraid to make decisions because they knew basically the safety net was there. So I made them stop screen sharing, and she learned more in 2 weeks than she had in 2 months.
So I think the key is be adaptable. Like you said, part of the transition when finding out you had this health issue, you became blind, there's things that you can't do, but you adapt. You have to think about it differently. So many people, when we had COVID, remote work became a possibility for many agencies. Some pushed against it and said, absolutely not. We have to be in person. I'm bringing everyone back. Or we never went home. We were, what was that called? Essential. Isn't that funny that it's not even in my head anymore, but we were considered essential workers and they never went home, to agencies who said, I'm totally fine with remote work. But what you just described was a way to lead a team that's remote, which is different than leading a team that's all in front of you. And the trick is you've got to be willing to adapt, right? You have to be willing.
What's funny is we actually went completely remote a year before COVID.
Did you? Yeah.
Because at the time we had our office manager, but we're dealing, we go from Puerto Rico to Hawaii. And we have 5 VAs in the Philippines. We have 2 in South America. And I'm like, really, what's the point of us being in office? If I'm going to make that one person come in, that one person's probably going to live in 6 weeks because they're being treated that differently than the rest of the team.
Right.
But then one of our new team members says, who came from a captive agency, she says, you don't understand, I have more availability to our team this way than I did working in that office for 4 years when someone was in the office next door. I can pick up the phone. I can video chat with someone and they're there. It's so easy to get a hold with somebody if I need them.
What's even funnier, Chris, when all this happened and COVID happened, and listen, I'm not minimizing the changes that occurred for people. But my husband has actually worked remote from our house for something like 25 years. This is like not a big deal. He leads a sales team for a large software company and he's done it remote. And honestly, I know more about his sales rep than some of the people I sat next to in an office. Shame on me. But here's the deal. We would go on trips with them and spend breakfast, lunch, dinner. I'd know their kids. I'd know their story. I'd know the things that they're working on. I knew what their wives did. So it's really interesting how we think it's so remote and there's no way to get connected. And that's just not true. There's plenty of companies out there doing it and doing it really well. Right.
Now, I will tell you this too. Some people don't like this rule. We haven't had a problem with it yet either. But also the rule is you got to be friends with each one of our team members on Facebook.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Myself included.
Interesting.
And it's not watching you, but it's, hey, they saw something on Facebook I did this weekend.
Now you know what to ask about. Right.
You know what to ask about. And you're building that relationship with your team members like you were in an office of, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I saw Lydia had a softball game yesterday. And it's helping us build a much stronger relationship with each other.
Yeah.
Because you're not feeling like a data entry clerk.
Right.
Right. That is such
Super
an interesting, I'm 23, I'm young, but growing up, I grew up in the age of social media, but I always remembered, my teachers, my professors, we can't be friends on social media until you graduate or, until this happens or whatever. And so it's ingrained in me that the people I work with, I shouldn't be friends with on Facebook, but it's interesting to hear you take an opposite approach because it actually helps your employees have that office talk, that background culture better. So that actually changed my perspective on being friends with people on social media, for sure.
And I'll tell you this, hours are also a different thing too. So I had a part-timer who were taking full-time. She goes, I just don't think I'm gonna be able to do full-time because my kids have softball practice at 5:30. So getting off at 5 makes it tough. Well, they're in the central time zone. And we've been struggling to find that hour before in the Eastern time zone. So she's like, what about 8 to 4? I said, actually, that works out perfect because it gives us morning coverage in the Eastern time zone. We basically got in the central time. So while everybody else may be working 9 to 5, she's working 8 to 4. When we hire somebody in mountain time, they're actually probably going to be 7 to 3. And what it's going to do, or a little bit later, then it's going to give us West Coast coverage. So they're staging each other, as I mentioned before, where they're not having that stress of, man, when I come in the morning, everything's going to have to worry about to go through 1,000 emails. Our VAs actually go through the emails after hours and before everybody comes in. So they only see emails that relate to them.
Super, super smart. I love it.
What advice would you give to other agency owners who are going through kind of the same experiences that you have? Maybe they, are building a culture of caring people and, or even your vision, they're going through major changes with their health and trying to deal with their agency. Like what are some of the big lessons you've learned from those things?
Well, I think one thing, as I said, I'm a completely open book, but I feel like you have to be that way mostly with your staff. Just like everybody's afraid to show their staff their balance sheet and their PL statement. And I think it's important for each one of our team members to see that, why didn't I make as much money this month? This is what happened. And it's hard for them to understand of, hey, we need to make these changes because so many agency owners are so afraid to share information. Oh, I don't want them to know how much I'm making. I don't want them to know how much the agency is bringing in because I don't want them to ask me for more money. And so, our team sees our balance sheet every month. They see our PL statement. They see all that stuff because as they see it coming in, they can see, man, this month was really hard, but why? And then the next month we can see sometimes huge improvements, or they can kind of see, hey, what does it look like with year 2 with me here, year 5 with me, year 6? And they can see that when I'm sharing those things with them.
Yeah. What advice, Chris, would you give to an agency owner that thinks something like this can't happen to them? What would you say to them?
I mean, you got to look in the mirror. Look, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 16 years old, and I still have it today. And that it causes some vision problems as well. And that's one thing is I can never get life insurance. So like our book of business is my retirement. Right. What are you going to do to protect that? You're young. You think nothing's going to happen. I had several friends who passed away from COVID before they were 35. You just never know. And what I've learned is you've got to have a plan in place.
Agreed.
Where if something happens, I don't care if you're 15. I'll give you an example. My uncle, who just sold his agency to my cousin at age 77, had to take over his dad's agency when he was about 24 years old because his dad was actually in a car accident with my aunt. His dad was killed and my aunt was in a coma for about 3 to 6 months. And I mean, he had been in insurance for 2 years, basically, when that happened. My cousin who just bought it, this agency has no technology at all. It didn't even have a VoIP because he was old school. So we've been working with him and implementing technology in these things. And so you've got to understand, whether you got 4 partners, 5 partners, what happens if one of them goes down? What happens if 2 of them goes down? What's that continuation plan? But I think it's so important that when you're thinking it's not going to happen to me, you're looking at it from a selfish standpoint because you're having a major impact on your staff's financial well-being. Because what if it does happen? You don't have that plan and tomorrow they're out of a job and they just spent 20 years with your agency.
Yeah, it's funny to me that, just like doctors are the worst patients, I think sometimes insurance agents don't think about the risk that they place inside their business by not having a plan. And you're right, it's not fair to their staff. It's not fair to their family that, we just talked about how your family reacted to you having a health issue. Many agency owners that have a health issue or even pass away, their family has no idea how to deal with the business in the middle of grief of loss of anything. I mean, any life change causes grief and causes all kinds of things. Alleviate that. Like, honestly, alleviate that part where you have a plan, someone knows what steps to take, and and you protect this thing that you've built because you didn't build it for no reason. You built it to be your retirement, to be your legacy, to be something of value. And by not having a plan, it loses value, sadly. Right.
And I'll give you an example of this. When my mother-in-law passed away from COVID, she was a real estate broker. The problem was she was the only broker in the organization. My father-in-law was not even on the business account. They had to probate the business. It took 6 months to do that just for him to be able to write a check to realtors to get paid. And he ended up selling it to my brother-in-law, who's a real estate agent. And they still have what's called a silent broker who had been working inside the organization. She's 85. And now he's having to take his task and trying to get all this stuff done really quickly. But there was no plan. It was just her. She was a small town broker, had a few realtors working with her. for about 30 years. But when she went down, basically everything went down. He couldn't access bank accounts, nothing. He knew nothing that was going on, not even in the business, but paying bills personally. She handled everything. There was no plan there. So my wife had to work with him on that. And so it was a big thing. And so for me, it's even a bigger, more challenge because if something happens to me, my wife wants nothing to do with it. I'm unfortunately in a niche or niche, whatever you want to call it, that there's not a lot of people that would come in and purchase the company really for what it's worth. And so that's one of the other challenges. So if something does happen to me, hey, how do we keep it going with the team where my family doesn't have to be too involved, but they're still receiving pay? Almost like setting up an annuity for them inside the business where something like that happens, where they can continue to get paid for a certain amount of time.
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you on here. It's a pleasure to see that you're doing well and that you are adapting, you're building, and you're figuring it out. Not many agencies can say that. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and being so open. And hopefully that helps other agency owners think about their business in a different way and put that plan in place. So thank you.
And I'll tell you what,
thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
They can go to floodinsuranceguru.com. They can go to poophatguy.com, or they can just email me, flood@floodinsuranceguru.com.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much for coming on today, Chris.